Ever hear of a battle so important it ended a war that lasted over a century, reshaped a continent, and ushered in a new age of warfare, yet almost nobody talks about it? Today we're diving deep into the forgotten fight that changed everything, the Battle of Castillon. The date is July 17th, 1453. The place, a small town in Gascony, southwestern France. For over 300 years, this region, along with Aquitaine, had been under English rule, was a core part of a sprawling continental empire held by English kings. But this was the tail end of the Hundred Years' War, and France, under the determined King Charles VII, was finally pushing back. This long, bloody conflict, famous for legendary clashes like Agincourt and Crécy, is about to reach its dramatic and surprisingly modern conclusion. By the mid-15th century, the French weren't just fighting with knights and swords anymore. They had a secret weapon, an innovation that would prove decisive, a powerful and well-organized artillery train. Under the guidance of master gunners like Jean Bureau, the French army had become experts in the use of cannons, not just for zeeking castles, but as a battlefield weapon. This brings us to Castillon. The French had laid siege to the town, and an English army, sent to relieve it, was on its way. This army was commanded by a true titan of medieval warfare, John Talbot, the Earl of Shrewsbury. He was nearly 70 years old, a veteran of countless campaigns, and a figure so feared by the French, he was known as the English Achilles. His arrival was meant to be a moment of English triumph, a reassertion of their long-held dominance. But the French were prepared. Instead of meeting the English in an open field, they constructed a heavily fortified camp, its walls bristling with over 300 cannons of various sizes. It was less a medieval encampment and more a 15th century fortress. It's designed specifically to counter a traditional English charge. Here's where it all went wrong for the English. A report reached Talbot that the French were in disarray, fleeing the field. This information was fatally wrong. It was likely just a cloud of dust kicked up by camp followers leaving the area. But Talbot, ever the aggressive commander, saw an opportunity. Without waiting for his main force, without proper reconnaissance, he gathered his vanguard of about 1,000 men-at-arms and charged headlong towards the French camp. It was a decision driven by pride and a lifetime of battlefield success, but it was about to collide with a new reality of war. As Talbot's knights thundered across the field, the French held their fire. They waited. Then, as the English came within range, the entire camp erupted in a storm of fire and iron. Hundreds of cannons unleashed a devastating barrage. The effect was horrific. The disciplined charge of the English knights dissolved into chaos. Men and horses were torn apart by cannonballs. It was a slaughter unlike anything they had ever experienced. Undeterred, Talbot's reinforcements began to arrive, but they were fed into the same meat grinder. Wave after wave of English soldiers charged the French earthworks, only to be systematically destroyed by the relentless artillery fire. The famed English longbowmen, who had dominated battlefields for a century, found themselves outranged and powerless against the fortified French positions. In the midst of the carnage, John Talbot himself was struck. A cannonball hit his horse, throwing the elderly commander to the ground and shattering his leg. Pinned and helpless, the legendary warrior was quickly surrounded. A French soldier, reportedly with a battle axe, ended the life of the English Achilles, with their leader dead. The English army's morale shattered completely. The fight, which had lasted barely an hour, turned into a rout. Panicked survivors fled towards the nearby Dordogne River, where many drowned trying to escape. The battle was a catastrophic defeat for England. The next day, the garrison at Castillon surrendered. The fall of the key city of Bordeaux followed in October. Just like that, 3 centuries of English rule in Gascony evaporated. England's last major army on French soil had been annihilated. The 100 Years' War was, for all intents and purposes, over. But the significance of Castillon goes far beyond redrawing the map. This battle was a watershed moment in military history. It was one of the first and most decisive European battles ever won by field artillery. The age of the chivalrous knight. The armored cavalry charge that had dominated medieval warfare was coming to a violent end. Gunpowder, cannons, and disciplined infantry were the future. The political fallout was just as massive. For France, the victory was a monumental step towards becoming a unified, centralized nation. The expulsion of the English allowed the French monarchy to consolidate its power, transforming the country from a fractured feudal patchwork into the beginnings of a modern state. For England, the consequences were disastrous. The loss of their continental possessions was a national humiliation. It severely weakened the authority of the English crown and fueled the bitter internal power struggles that were already brewing. Many historians argue that the shock and instability caused by this defeat were a major catalyst for the brutal civil wars that would tear England apart for the next 30 years, the Wars of the Roses. So why is this hugely important battle so often forgotten? In the English-speaking world, we tend to remember the glorious victories Crécy, Poitiers, Agincourt. Castillon is a story of a crushing defeat, the end of an era of English ambition on the continent. It's a less romantic tale than that of knights and longbows winning against the odds. It's a story of how an old way of war and an old world order was brutally and efficiently blown apart by cannons. Castillon deserves to be remembered. It wasn't just the end of the 100 Years' War. It was the noisy, violent birth of a new era. It marked the decline of feudalism and the rise of the modern nation-state. It signaled the dawn of gunpowder warfare, which would shape global history for the next 500 years. So the next time you think about medieval history, don't just picture knights in shining armor. Picture the smoky, thunderous field of Castillon, the forgotten battle that truly shaped the world we live in today. Thanks for watching. If you found this dive into forgotten history interesting, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories that you might have missed in the history books. See you next time.